Hi folks! This week we've looked at ways that the political economy of digital media shapes the internet and our current techno-cultural landscape. This video is going to highlight how much of what we take for granted about the internet is driven by purposeful, capitalist design by exploring how much changes when we move to a non-commercial context. A concept that Ian will look at in more detail in week 5 is the idea of the networked public. Introduced by technology and social media researcher Dana Boyd, the networked public explores the ways that the design of social media spaces shapes the communities that form within them. The reason that's an important idea to bear in mind, given that even as we're touching on it briefly, is that the shared context of the vast majority of online environments are not designed for the humans who use them. They're designed to be platforms, as we've already discussed this week. Their core design is to drink in as much data from every interaction every user has within their space as possible. That is their highest priority, potentially their only priority. Anything else is window dressing to just get punters in the door. That design creates a foundation which then shapes the communities which can form within those online environments. We can see this exact line of reasoning in Tumblr's recent approach to problem solving. After years of total indifference to people using their platform for child porn, despite the wider communities on Tumblr opposing it with every tool they had, Tumblr was finally moved to act when they were taken off the Apple Store. Their solution to this problem has been to block or delete a ridiculously high proportion of content and users from Tumblr, gutting entire communities because they're cleaning out the space in which they can then harvest data without any interest in preserving the communities that formed within it. Users and user communities are seen as entirely interchangeable so that you can carpet bomb them and wait for new people to fill the space and then be harvested. Communication theorist Robert Gell argues that alternative social media, or ASM, exist as a comparison to and a critique of corporate social media, or CSM. Gell explains that alternative media, generally, are dedicated to offering the means of communication to people normally excluded from media production, and who thus lack a voice. As such, alternative media are defined by their content, radical, progressive, feminist, queer, anti-racist, etc., as much as they are defined by the technology the content is mediated through. Alternative media has stood against the centralized hierarchies of traditional broadcast media, and Gell points out that what we think of as corporate social media has already made many steps that are useful from an alternative media perspective. Web 2.0 and developments since then have always trumpeted the fact that they are open, decentralized, and participatory in comparison to traditional broadcast media, and offer voices to people traditionally excluded from public discourse. We can see the expressions of alternative media principles in events like the Arab Spring, the Occupy Wall Street movement, and other big online events. However, the underlying business models that CSMs use duplicate many of the issues with traditional broadcast media by encouraging centralization and attempted monopolies. And there is a great deal of evidence that social media companies like Twitter censor activism that challenges companies who advertise on Twitter's networks. These problems suggest that there's a space for an alternative social media, which Gell argues have 3 primary shared features in common. Firstly, and most concretely, alternative social media don't host ads, and nor do they gather data that can be on-sold. They purposefully refuse to structure themselves as commercial platforms. As a result, their network publics are completely different than those of CSMs and are designed with entirely different priorities. ASMs are designed around their users and the ability to interact socially, not around only allowing interactions that have commercial relevance. Many ASMs take inspiration from CSM designs, but remove the commercial context. For example, you can still like posts, but rather than existing as data that can then be sold to advertisers, it's purely effective and tells someone you like what they're posting and hopefully encouraging them. Secondly, where platforms like Twitter or Facebook are closed monoliths with centralized control over their servers, ASMs are more open and distributed. This can be through peer-to-peer technology, that means there's no central hub to the network, or through what's called federation, where anyone can install their own instance of the ASM and it will connect with others in the network. The designers of ASMs also tend to make their code and practices open to the community, meaning that there is transparency and some levels of democracy behind both the underlying software and the social principles of the network publics that form there. Lastly, ASMs try to navigate a tension between surveillance and public performance in online spaces. They open up privacy policies to consideration in the same ways that they open up their code and social practices, encouraging the people who are using a network public to be involved in its politics of visibility. And they encourage users to hide from the people administering the network public if they wish to, in some cases going so far as to write guides for how to do so, which can then be verified by neutral parties. Most of all, there is no data gathering in ways that could tie back to surveillance capitalism. Alternative social media highlights the extent to which elements of traditional corporate social media is designed to profit from human activity rather than designed for the people who use them. Two examples of alternative social media would be the blogging platform Dreamwidth, which evolved to mimic LiveJournal, and the more recent Pillowfort, which mimics Tumblr. Both services seek to frame their users as customers by selling them expanded tools and services rather than selling their data to advertisers. Pillowfort is planning to leave beta in 2019, so it will be curious to see how it develops. Next week, we continue the trend of examining how the way technology is designed shapes the way that society engages with it. In this case, we'll be looking at the impact of algorithms and other technological infrastructure.